We're back here with Mr. Mike Saville. He's running for the, Legislative District 28, and that's right here in the Pocatello area or southeast Idaho. And Mike Saville, you're running again. We did interview you, and now, but we need to know who you are,
right,
what you've done, and just introduce yourself to the public so they'll know who is Mike Saville.
Well, one of the things that I found, Nancy, is that I went to a county commissioner that's well known here in the area, and I asked him if he'd take a picture with me, and he said, "I don't know who you are."
Yeah, really?
And I had never run for office, so I thought I'd just go over very briefly. This is of who I am, like you indicated, and kind of give you some of my background. First of all, I was born in Pocatello. I lived on Johnson with my grandmother, and then I part-time lived with foster parents in Grace on a farm, the Sullivan Farm. If you go into Grace, you'll see a huge Quonset hut that says Sullivan Farm 1896, and that's where I lived with my foster parents. My real parents were divorced when they were 18.
I see.
When I was 18 months old. So anyway, after that, I went to Emerson School down here. Jim Allen and I had the same teachers, Mrs. Rice and Mrs. Askelath, and I found out that we had something in common there. He was the county coroner.
I see.
We moved to Illinois. My dad was in the United States Air Force, and we lived there in Illinois. He married a farmer's daughter, so I lived on a farm in Illinois. And then after that, going to school there, I moved to Augusta, Georgia. He was stationed at Fort Gordon in an Air Force attachment, and that was before integration of schools. In other words, I went to school 5 years in segregated schools in the South. And I'll tell you something, a young kid from Idaho, I'd never experienced anything quite like that.
How was that?
Oh, it was awful. You had men, women, and colored bathrooms. You had water, and then you had colored. When I was in high school in an ROTC, I got on a city bus. I normally didn't ride on a city bus, and I sat down next to a lady that was 65 years old. She was black, and there was no place to sit. It was, after school, and the bus driver kept looking at me in the mirror and giving me dirty looks, or giving somebody dirty looks. And he stopped the bus, pulled it over, and he came back out of his seat and looked at that gal that was there before I got on and sat on it. He says, "You get in the back of the bus," and he looked at me and he says, if you do that again, I'm gonna kick you off this bus."
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was real. It was intimidation, fear, and all that sort of thing. So I really learned a lot in that 5 years. And my dad was in the Air Force, and we never had that. There wasn't that kind of relationship. In fact, it was so bad. I remember when the Harlem Globetrotters came to Fort Gordon, they couldn't play in Augusta. So those days were real, and it was kind of a formation on my part. And while I was there, I attended a high school. It was called the Academy of Richmond County. It had been built around the same period as George Washington. And it was a 1,200 student school, and they had an Army ROTC program that we went to every day. And it was it was taught by a military captain, a full captain, and plus 5 non-commissioned officers. And I learned a lot there. I could take an M1, and there was, like I say, there was 600 of us that were in that program. Now, this was in the Cold War, and there was programs like this all over the United States. It was because of the Cold War and Russia threatening us and that sort of thing, and Eisenhower was president. So then after that, but I did learn military tactics, and I learned one basic thing: don't go to war. It's horrible.
I could only imagine it.
Oh, yeah. Well, it taught me because, they taught hand-to-hand combat. They taught military firefights and that sort of thing. And I'm talking when you're 16, 17, and 18 years old.
Yeah.
So I moved to Panama Canal Zone.
Oh.
And I graduated from there. My dad motivated me to join the United States Air Force. What are you going to do, son? I want to go to college. I don't quite see it that way. So I was on my way to Lackland Air Force Base. I went to Denver, Colorado, went to Lowry Air Force Base. I was trained in electronics on the F-105 aircraft. And then I transferred to Spangdahlem, Germany after about a year. And for 3 years, I had my regular job, but then there was some fellows said, "Well, how would you like to work at the Armed Forces television station?" We had a UHF television station serving 3 bases of about 25,000 personnel, and I loved that job. And it was I did my normal Monday through Friday, but then I worked Saturdays and Sundays. I mean, you're here, you understand, right? It was just, it was great. So I learned a lot, and then I was going to school at night. Plus, I visited 18 countries on leave. I didn't want to waste that time all over the place. So I was honorably discharged, came back to Pocatello, and I was hired by IBM. Internet, you ever heard of them? International Business?
Oh, yes.
Okay. IBM
They
here.
still around?
Oh, yes, ma'am, but they've changed.
Oh,
They really have.
okay.
IBM is here locally as a customer engineer. I was part of, to maintain the IBM equipment, I had customers of FMC, Simplots, ISUs, Monsanto, the Union Pacific Railroad. The job required me to be on call 24 hours a day.
Wow.
Okay, 7 days a week. I get calls, I put in a whole day, maybe go to bed at 10 o'clock, get a call at 2 in the morning and work around the clock. I mean, it was just part of the job. So anyway, by the way, the day that I was hired, my wife, Rochelle, called me up for a date, a blind date, to go to a church outing. I didn't know what she looked like, but she knew my mom. But anyway, I thought that was coincidental. And by the way, we're celebrating our 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow.
We have celebrated.
Congratulations.
Yeah, well,
50 years.
So IBM, after 10 years, I had 3 children here. They were born in Bannock Memorial, and I was pretty well topped out. So IBM asked me if I wanted to be a manager. Well, see, in IBM at that time, it was a family, really generated business.
Yeah.
We were very, very competitive in terms of that, and they send you to a management development school. In my case, they sent me to Rochester, Minnesota, which was a plant and development manufacturing facility, where I could work on from the time that the concept of the machine was on a blackboard or chalkboard to the point where we shipped the machine and then maintained it. I was part of that. I worked with engineers, learned a lot, and that's what they did to groom management for the field. Well, I didn't really want to go there, but they offered me a job in Los Angeles as a field manager. And it was very difficult because there was a lot of things going on, and the only place we could really afford was a place that was 3 hours commute every day.
Wow.
For 7 years.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's 56 miles. The first 20 miles was 20 minutes, and then over Sepulveda Pass and the Wilshire Quarter, all over the Los Angeles basin. So I did that for about 7 years. We had some family issues, and my priorities in life has always been my faith, my family, my job, and then volunteerism. But if my family was ever impacted by the job, then the job was secondary. And always. And it seemed to work out. That's why we've been married 50 years, I think.
That's great.
So I retired from IBM after 32 years. We transferred to Salt Lake City. I finished up my career as a hardware specialist for IBM. I was the fellow, one of the fellows that was called because of the extensive training I had to repair machines that once they replaced the parts and once they done all the diagnostics and everything, and the customer's about ready to throw the equipment out the door, I was the guy that was called in to fix it, and I could. And I was very good at what I did.
Wow.
One of the things I want to emphasize too is that IBM, the reason they were so successful in the 75 years up until 1991, when they were taken over by a Wall Street executive, CEO, was because we were all sales. And the example I like to give you is that I think I was with IBM about 3 or 4 years. We had a 360 Model 30 mainframe at Garrett Freight Lines. That machine cost $10,000. It was the most per month to lease in $1966. And the memory on it, just to put it in perspective, you know how your iPhone is, 56 gigabytes or whatever, right?
Okay.
Big. Well, it was 64K of memory, 64,000 bits of memory in those days. I mean, it was very much in the early stages of the computer industry. We had cables this big, and sometimes they went to multiple rooms. We just punched cards. But just to give you an example of what we had to do, when you have a machine down like that and it's payroll day, and it happened in Garrett Freight Lines. We went down, there was me and my buddy, we were trying to fix the machine. You have to be able to explain to the IT director what's going on, so that when he goes to the boss and talks to him, to make sure that he has confidence enough in you so that they don't throw your machine out. Well, there's nothing like having 10 truck drivers pacing back and forth on opening day of fishing waiting for their paycheck.
I could imagine.
It's a little bit of pressure.
Yeah.
But we did, that's what we did. We were really a sales organization, and I didn't really realize it till later.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, after 32 years, and along the way I got a Bachelor of Science degree at the University of Phoenix, going to night school 20 hours a week for about 3.5 years, while working 60 hours of average time at IBM.
Wow.
I was hired by a nonprofit financial services organization. They've been around for 100 years. It was called Thrivent Financial, or Aid Association for Lutherans. And now they sell to any Christian organization, but it was a faith-based organization. And I did pretty good. I remember calling them up, and I said, well, how am I doing, because we were kind of isolated.
Yeah.
And I said, I haven't heard from you in 6 months after I hired. And they said, well, okay, you're doing okay. I said, well, I don't know what I'm doing. He says, well, keep doing what you don't know what you're doing, because you're doing fine, because your numbers look good. But I was Rookie of the Year my first year in that business. And it was a different kind of business, because you had to have 12 different product lines. It's not like you had just life insurance or long-term care, settlement options, mutual funds, stocks, everything you can think of, though we had those product lines. So anyway, retired in 2013. My wife retired from the city of Salt Lake. We built a home in McCammon. In 2007, we had no idea that there was going to be a financial crisis, and nobody went to jail crisis. So we were stuck with 2 homes for 5 years, and we watched our neighbors lose their homes, and we struggled. So I couldn't retire. I've got 3 kids, 4 grandkids, and 2 great-grandkids. And in the last years, we've traveled to 16 different countries on tour, spent about 90 days visiting Japan and Russia and Finland and Australia, New Zealand, China.
It seems like you have a fetish for visiting all these countries. What's going on there?
Well, one of the things, I don't know if you're familiar with amateur radio. I've been an amateur radio operator for 58 years, ever since I was a kid. When I was living with my grandmother in Johnson, they got me a little Morse code thing. I've always been kind of curious, but I will say this: we weren't exactly high income, but we were poor, and I was one of the few kids that played in intramural basketball with holes in the shoes and holes in my socks. But I guess it must have been, they put me in advanced classes, because otherwise I was pretty bored. But all the kids that I was going to school with, they were all their dads were attorneys and professionals and that sort of thing. But it did okay, really did. But we in order to support that hobby, I had to do things like cut 6 lawns on Saturday and that sort of thing. So that's who I am. I hope I went through it fairly quickly without boring anybody. But yeah, I'm from here. I grew up here.
So with your experience, your education, your travels, your family life, your church, how does that prepare you for
one of the things
legislature?
One of the things that I thought about this, it's a common question. The art of politics is persuasion, and you have to be able to persuade. And by the way, I have every one of the opponents on the GOP side, and all of them are just top-notch people, otherwise they wouldn't be doing this. And so I don't have any problem working with any one of them. What I have a real problem with is the ideology. In Utah, for 5 years, I was a Republican voting district chairman, and I'd go to the meetings, and I'd meet with the governor. I met with the governor of Orlean Walker one time in a closet in a school. We were meeting the candidates for the night. Orrin Hatch, I've been to his events. But when I came back to Idaho, one thing that really bothered me was how education has really been starved here.
Yes.
And I couldn't understand it. When I was asked to run, a state legislator called me up on the phone and said, "We'd like you to run," and I said, "No."
Really?
Absolutely, yeah, because I know what the commitment, And then I looked out the window, and then this is right at the time, at the end of the hour and a half, I looked out and I saw the children, first, second, and third graders, getting off the bus at 4:45 in the evening, and they get on the bus at 6:45 in the morning.
Yeah, that's
okay.
rough.
And then they go to school 4 days a week, and I said, "What is that?" and I finally said, "Well, maybe I can do something to help." And now, what I bring to the table to answer your question is, I bring my experience my discipline from the military, plus traveling around as a kid at various school systems. I will tell you, I saw different levels of schools because I was in the elementary school system. The best one was in the Panama Canal Zone that was actually funded by the Panama Canal Company.
Really?
Yeah, they Panamanian citizens could come there, but they had to pay $1,500 a year in $1960 to attend that school.
Really?
But boy, they sure put you through your paces because they were all master's degrees and teachers. You know, it was incredible. So I saw the different systems as I went through. I also got my knuckles rapped by my first grade teacher when I pulled a girl's pigtails in front of me.
Oh, really?
It didn't destroy me, but I remember that. But anyway, so it's really, so I bring that to the table. I forgot to mention, I was in the Junior Chamber of Commerce in various positions. In fact, Greg Anderson and Cheryl Anderson, while we were here in the 70s, asked me to, would I like to join, and I did. He was president of the Junior Chamber. So we got to know them.
He passed away.
Yes, he did. Yeah, we were going to go golfing. We kept track of each other because both of he and I, he became the president of the Idaho JCs, okay, and then later on went into the city council and the mayors. Yeah, we knew Greg, always just super nice, and in fact, they even asked him for advice the first time I ran. But yeah, sad. But we've known them for a long time. But anyway, he got me rolling on that, and I was very active in Minnesota in the junior chamber and on a state level, motivating others. Then they gave me a national award. It's called the Upson Award. There's only, out of 800 people, there were only 40 given out nationally. And it was mainly based on performance and helping the local chapters. And then I went to California, and they gave me the opportunity to be a regional director. And it was like, I don't know, 200 of them, and I got one of the 20 national awards, top 20 out of that. But along the way, it was, in the junior chamber and volunteering, I worked with alcoholics. They had two Warm Springs Alcoholics Assistance Center mandated by the courts. I gave motivation talks there. Walking around San Fernando, recruiting JCs, Carson, and all over the San Fernando Valley. And then from there, I exhausted out, but they gave me what they called a JCI senatorship, which is a lifetime achievement at that time. Out of the 2 million that have gone through the organization over those years, I think it was 32,000 that they had given out. It's really just kind of like a pure honor.
So is that more like your performance? And,
yes, well, it was based on...
Seems like you're doing a lot of activity for whatever you get into. Is that all part of your...
It's part of my makeup.
Forte?
It's my makeup, absolutely. I'm very competitive. Okay, and so yes, it is. Some guy came in right off the street, and they were looking for a project, and he said, "Well, how about a rodeo?" A rodeo in Southern California, and. So we all sat around. I mean, we're just a bunch of young guys under 35, and the Chamber of Commerce have been talking about doing it for 20 years and never did it. So we got around and started doing it. And I was the administrative chairman. I had to get all the hardware, the seats, all the lights, all the other things.
Yeah.
There was 120 different permits we required in Los Angeles. And I got on the KNX or whatever, the 50,000 watt station. But anyway, it took us 18 months. We were meeting weekly on that. And the book was this thick of what we had to do, and it was really a group effort. We were all motivated to working together and keeping all that together. Well, to make a long story short, we had the opening. The Antelope Freeway, and this was in Canyon Country, California. The Antelope Freeway was backed up 5 miles.
Oh, really?
And they couldn't get in. Yeah, and I was running around with the money in a Bota bag, about $15,000 or $15,000. But anyway, it was a success. But then the Chamber of Commerce said, you young guys, you don't know what you're doing. Because how much money did you make? And we said, well, we made $1,000. Well, that's nothing. We're going to make more. So they took it away from us. They said, we'll take it. You guys can have the beer tent. Well, the next year, they took it over, and they invited the Sons of the Pioneers. You remember Ionized Cody?
Yeah.
Okay, Rochelle actually drove him in a car. There's all kinds of these actors around there. So and he was an Italian, by the way.
I know he was an Indian.
No, he was not Indian.
But he kind of looked like one.
Well, he did, yeah. He kept asking. He had this huge ring. I'll never forget it. But you get to meet a lot of those people. But the next year they invited the Sons of the Pioneers with Roy Rogers. They paid him $17,000,
Wow.
and we had the beer tent there and everything, and we watched as the rain came. In 3-day event, it rained every day.
Wow.
And the bottom line was that they lost $17,000. So we really felt we had our chest pumped out there at 1,000. But that, yes, you're absolutely correct. Done a lot of things, and we enjoyed that. It allowed us to really interact with the communities in Minnesota and California. And then later coming back to Salt Lake City, I was elected as the president of the JCI, which is the Old Timers Senate. And then eventually they said, well, we need a national vice president. So I was in 5 states. I had to go to Hawaii. That was one of my states. And then so we got. But basically, but we came back here really because of the attraction. Both Rochelle and I are from this area. In fact, her grandfather was born in McCammon, and my mother's here. She's 91 years old, and we're very proud of her.
Yes.
We're working very hard to make sure she can get to 102 like my grandmother did. She worked at the Union Pacific Railroad. So yeah, we came back here, but quite frankly, I couldn't believe the education, how poorly it's been sponsored. So when I look back, and I'm kind of an analytical guy, I analyze things and then try to come up with a formulation to fix things. That's what we did. That was all I've done in my entire career. When I saw what happened in 2006 with Senator Risch, when he was governor, calling a special session in September of 2006, and then cutting the property taxes across statewide of 3 mills, that's 0.003%. And then he turned around and raised the sales taxes by 20% from 5 cents to 6 cents. And the effect was, basically, it was a tax shift from high value properties and homes to seniors and families. It was really a tax shift. A 10-year evaluation says that was not a tax cut, it was a tax increase. But really, basically, it was a tax cut for the people that have a lot of money. And the net result was out in Marsh Valley, where we are, and the kids that are going to school, with a 20-minute ride, they go to school 4 days a week. The money that was cut out in Marsh Valley as a result of that HB1 was $980,000 before 2006. It was cut down to $32,000. Okay, now I
said 3,200.
32,000.
To 90,000.
980,000.
Oh, 980,000. Okay,
almost
right.
$1 million.
That's a lot.
Down to 32,000. Right, and by the way, this is not hearsay. This is all in public records.
Yes.
And so they did an evaluation. And they said that tax cut was not a tax cut. It was a tax increase and a tax shift to people that have less opportunities to and pay. So I
was that on property tax? Wasn't there also a sales tax that was?
Yes, it was a tax cut across the board on all property taxes by 3 mills. That's 0.003. Okay, 3 mills. And then they raised sales taxes from 5 cents to 6 cents.
Yeah.
That is a 20% increase. Okay, and but when there was an article in the Spokesman that said that somebody looked at it. I've got a record of who it is, can't remember who it is, but it was really a tax increase. So that was it. But the thing is, I grew up on a farm, and the farm in Idaho over in Grace. It was a 300-acre farm. There was 2 families. Farming is not the same as it was back then when I was a kid. The farm has been now absorbed by 10,000-acre farms. There's 6 farms over in Soda Springs, as I was told, that are 10,000 acres, which is fine. I mean, that's good. But the only point is that farming is not the same. It's a business. But I also know if you want to talk about taxes to any farmer, don't talk about tax increases. My foster dad, I remember as I was 6 years old, I said, "Why is that tractor out there, or it was a combine rather, combine out there, is it rusting? Why is it rusting?" And he says, "Tax deduction." Or tax depreciation. So really, that's it. And then there's other schemes too, that if you have a cow, that you can get your taxes reduced on, say, on a $50,000 property. It's taxed at $500. If you say you're going to put a cow on there, and it's going to make you $1,000, you can get your taxes cut from $500 down to $50.
So what I guess I don't quite understand the property tax. What percentage, how do they determine what the tax is going to be?
Well, the assessor does that, and then you have all the levies.
Based on what?
Well, based on property value. Okay.
Property value.
Right, 100,000, for example. If you had a house that was appraised at 100,000 after all the deductions, that'd be $300 a year. That was the tax cut. But you've got a sales tax that went up 1 cent.
Yeah.
Okay, so it really, what it was a shift. Now, if you're a large corporation and you have 1 million acres,
yeah,
that's a heck of a tax cut.
Oh yeah.
Okay, but who's picking up the burden on that? One of the things, and the other things, is when I go to various public events, and by the way, I've talked to about 6,000 people. Okay, and I figured I'm not bragging about it, but I've volunteered, and you can see I'm kind of not hyper, but I'm pretty active.
Yeah. Okay.
And I talked to them, and one of the things that always bothered me, I would describe how Marsh Valley, and by the way, this is not only true for Marsh Valley, it's true in the 20 rural districts. Okay, they're all been cut. But I go to, and I mention this to somebody, and somebody will say, I don't want to pay for another kid's education. Okay, and I can't tell you how that just internally bothers me, because I was poor, and education was the key to me lifting myself upward mobility out of that. I can't tell you how that bothers me.
Yes.
We're a society here, and the thing is that these same children that you don't think that you need to educate are going to maybe join the military and protect you from the sky and other things. I mean, we're a society. There's too much of this me kind of going on here, and but I can't do anything about that. But really, there's 15,000 teachers in K through 12. In Idaho is 50th in the nation, somewhere between 48 and 50. That's $6,700 per child. The rest of the country is 11,000. Okay, and I sat. One of the things you learn and you get to meet people. Downey had capital of the day, and Governor Otter came over. The room was filled with 70 people, and there was me. And so Governor Otter's asking, giving his State of the Union and saying how this is capital of the day, and he says, "Are there any questions?" And so I raised my hand, and I forget what it was. It was about veterans. Yeah. He didn't really know the answer, and so I kept quiet and asked other questions. Hardly anybody asked any questions, and so I raised my hand again and asked another question. And it was right before lunch, and so we're talking and we're walking and going through the lunch line together. Yeah. And he follows me to where I'm sitting. My wife's here, and all Democrats are here, and he sits across from me. So I had a 30-minute one-on-one with Governor Otter, and it was a unique experience.
What did you learn?
Oh, I learned a lot. When you got to remember, I worked in the corporate world. I dealt with executives. There was only actually 6 levels when I was hired. They told me between me and the CEO's position. Maybe baloney.
The top one now.
Yeah. But anyway, when I talked to Governor Otter, he's a very nice guy. He's very personable. When I asked him a question, I said, "Governor, do you think that a child can get the same competitive education going to school 4 days a week?" 11 hours a day versus a child that goes to school 5 days a week? And he says, "Jury's still out." And I said, "Well, Governor, don't you, education has been cut so poorly here. We're sitting at $6,700 per pupil. It's the lowest in the nation, and the average is 11,000. He said, "Well, stop." Okay. Yeah. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I want to tell you, when I was in Congress, I went to a school in the District of Columbia, and I looked down that hallway, and you know what? They had an armed guard there. They had a policeman going up and down. Every floor had a policeman to protect those kids." And I said, "Well," and he says, "That's why they're spending $11,000 per pupil." And then I said to him,
"Oh dear."
And I said to him, I said, "Governor, over in Wyoming, they spend $15,000 per pupil, and Mississippi spends $8,400. And he stopped me and he says, "Are you going to talk, or are you going to let me talk?" And so I said, "Governor, I'm going to
He's
let."
very personable.
Yes. We laughed, and everybody was laughing around him. But the thing is, when I got through, I realized that he was really a marketeer. Now, you're talking to another person that spent your entire career marketing, in a marketing organization. Plus, I had to survive as a marketeer. Yeah. And by the way, in that business I was in, they didn't tell me. I told them that I didn't want to be in a business this is going to be my final thing before retirement. And I said, I don't want you laying me off. And he said, don't worry about a thing as long as you got your numbers.
Yeah.
Well, it's 300 hours a month. But I found out of 100 new hires after they've been vetted, at the end of 3 years, there's only between 9 and 20 people left. Okay, it's a tough business because the only way you survive is if somebody buys something from you, and a lot of times that takes trust. Okay, and I learned that. We had an expression. I never knew what the commissions were. I always said, I'm an advocate. I help those who can't speak for themselves. And see, that's what I want to carry on to the legislature. There's 100 people. There's 33 in the Senate, and I know that I can't do it alone. And that's why we need to have more Democrats, and we need to change the congressional delegation with electing Aaron and others like. And we have a lot of Democrats running. But anyway, after I got through, I realized that Governor Otter is a salesman. He is a salesman. He has that characteristics now. But I've watched him and followed him. And for example, the grocery tax. Here you have a bipartisan effort to cut the grocery taxes, and he vetoes it. It was $83 million. Now, another fact a lot of people don't know, there's the Fair Share organization in Idaho. They have identified $450 million if they would sunset some of these exemptions to sales tax. There's a $3 billion possibility of collecting sales taxes, but $2 billion have been exempted since 1965, a lot of them, massage parlors and other things. It's incredible. You can find this at fairshareidaho.org. It was a petition, but they're not doing it anymore, but there's a lot of good information there.
Really?
There is a lot of money available in that sales tax, and in fact, they identified $400 million, and I think it was only 12 categories that they sunset the rules. But the governor's not doing that, and neither is the GOP-controlled legislature.
Now explain sunset the rules.
Sunset means go away. And my uncle was a city councilman of Alameda. He was serving with George Hansen, and when I got out of the Air Force in 1966, he kept me up till 4 in the morning telling me how that sales tax was not going to go to education. It was 3 cents. And you know what? He was right. Okay, and the same thing, I don't know if it's true in the lottery, is supposed to go to education. They say the huge numbers, but according to the Fair Share Idaho, only 2% goes to education. But I've heard from another legislator saying, well, it's not really 2%, it's 8%. But very little of the lottery goes to education.
But I thought it just went primarily for structure, construction.
I don't know exactly what it goes for.
That's what I understand, some of that knowledge.
Well, the thing is that there's bond levies that are being conducted for high schools and the rest. Why doesn't that money pay for those high schools, up in Idaho Falls and other areas? Okay, so that's kind of what I learned. And then the other thing that I learned is the GOP here, and I couldn't quite understand it. If you go out to the SOS, the Secretary of State campaign disclosure, I discovered that my opponent in 6 years, in 6 campaigns, received $100,000 from 200 political action committees and corporations like John Deere and Cesaro and Amalgamated. A lot of them are outside the state of Idaho.
Outside, really?
Yeah. It's $100,000. And it was 269 donations, and I looked at the individual donations, and I'm just going from memory. It was, I think, 16 people gave $6,000. I had 70 people give me over $7,000, and I appreciated that. So I heard on HBO they had a program that said these corporations, these PACs, these political action committees, would give money to a challenger. So I tested the waters.
Oh, yeah.
I wrote all 200 of them.
Okay.
And I watched my mailbox. Guess how many wrote back?
0.
0. Absolutely. But I appreciated the AFL-CIO and the Union Civic engineers over in Boise. They gave me $750. But everything else, I spent a lot of money out of my own pocket, and that's why I'm back. I'm not used to doing that. But I didn't really understand that. Okay. And what they use that money for, of course, the mailing, a mailing costs $7,000?
That's expensive. I could only imagine.
Yeah, each one of those cards costs $1.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, they've got the money to do it. If you've got $50,000, you can spread it around. You can buy billboards, you can buy radio time, you can buy the brochures, the mailings, on and on.
Yeah.
Advertisement, all kinds of things, pass out, lots of, and it's not really a fair playing field if you're a challenger. Now, the other thing is, if you're a GOP a Republican challenger, the money flows from these other people that get it through the corporations. The leadership, for example. You'll see a $1,000 deposit from another Republican to a challenger if he's got a chance. And there's a lot of people that incumbents, basically they're funding the incumbents. It's all public record. You have to look at it. I put it on my Facebook so to help people understand. Now, does that mean that they're unbeatable? I don't think so. I got 38% of the vote, and I received 7,000 votes last election. And that's another point, is that one of the things that in the election in 2016, in the 28% of the votes that were cast, we had 5 people running, 3 for the legislature and 2 for the county commissioners. The races were 50-50 in this county, in legislative 28. Okay? 50-50. In other words, a 50% Democrat, 50% Republican. Now, there's only, when I was looking at it, there was only 1,365 registered Democrats, 9,600 Republicans, and 11,000 unaffiliated. So there was people that were voting for me and all the others. Now, 3 weeks later, I mean, this is 3 weeks before the election is cut off, and early absentee, 28% of the ballots, all of a sudden it just shifts down to 65-35. And that's when I had my recount. I recounted. I had a recount because I couldn't understand it, and the machines down in the. I found out they were using zip drives for media, and I decided. I said zip drives. I said that's iOmega. You know what zip drives are?
No.
Well,
go ahead.
They're 20-year-old technology, and I asked the county clerk. I said, "Where do you get zip drives?" He said, "We get them from eBay. We can't buy them."
Really?
I had, when I was in Salt Lake City, iOmega was the parent corporation that produced zip drives. They were in Roy. They went out of business in 2008. They were bought out by EMC Corporation. They were my client. And when I went to the recount, I said, "Are you kidding me? You're using zip drives?" And the machines were over 20 years old in terms of old technology. Well, I understand they now have later models. It's from a small company. The other thing I found out.
But what about the count? Was it accurate?
The count, there was, the rules are this, I couldn't find who voted. The information wasn't available, who voted in the early voting, because I wanted to see who it was. I was told it was in the information I had, but it was not. It was 9,500 people. And so I couldn't get the information, so I was told if I wanted to get it, I needed to go to the Secretary of State. And I called them and the Attorney General, and they said, okay, if you want to find out, you got to send me a $100 check per precinct. I said, well, that's $3,400. He said, you want to recount or not? I said, well, let me think it over. And I just couldn't let it go. And I think you can kind of tell that if something bothered me like that. And so I did. I wrote him a check for $3,400 out of my pocket. Okay. I was and I was told that I was a fool by a former county clerk for doing so. But anyway, there was 50 people in the room. There was a representative, Mr. Hurst from the Secretary of State, and then there was an Attorney General's representative. Did the count. I was allowed to look at a precinct of so many votes. It was about 850 in Bannock County, and I was allowed to watch every ballot being hand counted, and then they were put in the machine. Now, what I learned, you have to, one of the things that IBM I was taught was how to look for sequences of things. You look at top, bottom, and that sort of thing to fix problems, and I saw a lot where, Republicans were voting for Democrats, Democrats were voting for Republicans. It was all over the board. But we counted them by hand. They run them through the machines here in Bannock County. The numbers didn't come out right. It was explained, well, these are the provincials. Now, a provincial ballot is when somebody shows up at a polling place and they're not registered to vote. And it takes 10 minutes to register them, but then it's counted later and confirmed by the county clerk that they are actually residents. And they use driver's license information primarily to confirm that they are, in fact, residents. But that's not counted. But they said that was the reason the numbers were off. Okay, I accepted that, but I learned a lot. Why are we using zip drives? That when the company went out of business in 2008, Okay?
Idaho. That's
no,
Idaho.
No, it's Bannock County. Anyway, I went over.
Well, that's Idaho.
Yeah. Anyway, so I went to Power County, and this was a smaller county. 2,800 votes were counted. 6 precincts. And so I was allowed to select the precinct. Same scenario. There was 20 people in the room. There was only one person in there that was objective. Everybody else was rooting and cheering for the election results. I mean, that's just normal. I mean, you're a county clerk. Everybody's kind of nervous, but I paid for that. I couldn't even eat with them. You know, I was kind of isolated, me and my wife.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, they had to do what they had to do, and I went along with it. Well, so when we got to the count, and this is what it was, is that there was a person over here,
Yes.
okay, that was observing, and it was one of the volunteers. The person that, from that particular precinct, it was out at the airport, by the way.
Okay.
Myself, a lady stacking the ballots, and then 2 ladies keeping track. So there were 6 people involved in the process.
Okay.
Okay, 12 eyeballs, as I say. Well, when the count was done, and by the way, there was 7 what they call undervotes. 7 marks that weren't, neither one of us got a mark. So the fellow that was calling them out, he'd say Saville, Guthrie, Saville, Guthrie, Saville. And the count wound up to be 100 for me and 158 for Mr. Guthrie. Okay? Then, now you got to remember, the purpose of this thing is to verify that the machine's in the voting and all this sort of thing, right? So he went over to the machine. We had one misfeed, but it counted okay, and he fed all these ballots in. Secretary of State guy is here, Attorney General's here, I'm here watching, and other people are just watching, and he feeds it in. It's like a check, it's like a sorter.
Yeah.
Well, let's say a shredder. Okay, it looks like a shredder.
Okay.
Okay, it goes in and is read, and then the screen says okay, and it read it okay.
Oh.
Guess what well, I'll tell you. The result was, remember it was 100 to 158. The machine counted 98 and 162.
What was that?
And why was that? Yeah. And I looked over at the Secretary of State. They were both in deer in headlights. First comment was, well, we had some ballots sticking together. And this lady says there's no way that they stuck together because there was 6 people watching this. So anyway, how did they do that? You know, I could understand if I lost 2 because the machine wouldn't read, but on the other hand, how did he gain 4? How did my opponent gain 4? 2% error. Well, the law says if anything, I think above 1% between the machine and the hand ballot requires a full count of the county.
Did that happen?
Well, the Secretary of State guys and the Attorney General guy looked at me and says, what do you want to do? I said, we're going to follow the law to the letter. I said, we're going to count them all.
Did you have to write another check?
Nope. There was 2 groups and they counted. Well, I was the only person there that I was trying to observe everything, but let me just say that there was folks, and I wasn't allowed to see the interim count. But I will say one thing: there was a precinct up in Arbin Valley, and I was looking at the ballots because all the ballots were sealed. Really, the clerks do a great job. I mean, there's no question that they're doing their job. It's security and everything. I mean, they do what they have to do. Not even in questioning, you know, their procedures. But they opened up this package from up there, and there was 100 ballots, and 90 of them were handicap ballots, which are about half size. And I looked at that, I said, are there 90 handicapped people up in Arbin Valley? And I looked at, and I talked to the county clerk, and she's, they can use the handicap ballots if they want to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, guess what the count was? I'll just tell you.
Tell me, please.
Oh, yeah, I know. It was 90 votes. There was 100 ballots cast, 90 votes for Guthrie and 10 for me. And the rest of the whole county was 65-35. Okay?
That's weird.
It is weird. It means that's the importance of having poll watchers. But what I thought later on, I said, how could that happen? And then you have to remember, and you know that I was trained extensively at IBM on computers, and lots of experience. So I got together with another IBM retiree, and we decided and we tried to knock our heads together to see how this happened. And he said and we said, what would happen if there was a microcode or firmware inside the machine that's invisible? Now, mind you, the code that comes in, it doesn't come from the federal government. It comes from a small company in Nebraska. And it's a private company. And she showed me the code for the 6 machines, and it was in the USB sticks. You know, the USB things you used to use for photographs?
Right.
Yeah, and it was signature required. It was sent in the same truck probably as my UPS Amazon book. Okay, so the signature required, of course. But it was, in other words, there wasn't any special security like in a sealed case. And so anyway, we put our heads together and said, what happens if they had a microcode program? In IBM, we called it a machine level code or firmware. The term used today is firmware. The only person who knows anything about it is an engineer. The Secretary of State wouldn't know, the clerk wouldn't know, nobody would know, I wouldn't know, nobody knows. It's really what defines the machine and how it counts. Now this code is generated by this company when they generate the ballots, and they also generate the code. The operator puts the code in, says okay, the clerk says okay, I got the okay, the book says it's okay. But what happens if you have a little program in there that says, okay, I'm gonna shift some votes, and 100 ballots are counted, and at 100 they said the question is there an unmarked ballot? Yes. An undervote? Give one to candidate B. Continue on. Go to 200. You have undermarked ballots? Yes. Give 2 to candidate B. Subtract 1 from candidate A. And here again, it's all based on the undervotes. And then at the final end of the run, they could say, okay, do you still have undervoted ballots available? Yes. Give 1 to candidate B, subtract candidate A, subtract 1 from candidate B, or however I said. Anyway, -2 plus 4, 2%, and nobody would know. And the thing is that, I'm technical, and I look back into the machine and the history through the EAC, and I determined that machine had a history of 2% errors, and they're supposedly corrected. But there was a college professor, and Senator Risch was part of this on C-SPAN, and he asked the question, can these machines be modified without being connected to the internet? And the college professor said yes. Him and his students have been modifying these things. So anyway, I don't want to get into that too much, but that's what I learned. But primarily,
that's interesting, these codes, because I'm looking at the tribal elections. I've always questioned, are these machines really accurate, or is there some program inside that can do what you've just explained?
Yes, ma'am. It's been proven. France and Holland. France does not use electronic ballot counting machines. As a result of Brexit and what happened in the United States in the 2016 election, Holland does not use electronic counting machines. They hand ballot count. And the information, the results are available within 24 hours.
Really?
Yes, ma'am. And you're talking about 80 million people.
Wow.
Okay?
Okay.
Right. So this is really true. Intel is screaming it. There was a convention in Las Vegas, DEF CON, that they modified them. They had all these hackers there. They could change it. And this college professor says he could change it with his students and nobody would know.
Yeah.
See, this is not, I think Congress is computer challenged.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, but I'd like to, in my remaining time, I'd like to say education is very important. 15,000 teachers are, and when I think back of people that had a major impact in my life, it was teachers. It really was. Because if I wasn't getting something, the teacher would give me the time to do that. And I talk to teachers here, and they say there's so many procedures and so many different things that they have to do that their time is somewhat limited in terms of what they can spend on an individual child. And especially when they're going to school 4 days a week. Okay, there's no excuse for that.
And it's 11 hours a day, you said?
Well, when I figured it out from the time they wake up in the morning, mom wakes them up and gets them ready for school. They catch the bus at 6:45. They drive them down to catch the bus. And then they get home. It's probably 5:30 before they're settling down. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's 1,000 teachers that don't come back. Okay, there's 15,000 teachers. Idaho has a very difficult time finding teachers. And why? Well, when 75% of the school budget, and any school budget, or any budget in any operation, is for wages and benefits of the workers. And when you're talking such low wages and benefits, and then I met teachers that said, I love German and I love Spanish, but they won't let me teach German anymore. And then you talk to parents that says, why am I paying $100? Why am I spending all this money? They want $1,000 for track or all these different things.
Yes.
Art programs. We don't have art programs. You know, an example, that terrible shooting in Florida when those kids could get up and speak. Wasn't that tremendous?
Oh, yes.
The way they communicated? That's an example if you adequately fund a school system, you know, and those kinds of elective programs and the theaters and the arts.
Yeah.
You know, school isn't strictly, you know, reading and math. And a lot of people think that's what it is. In Finland, for example, they go to school 3.5 hours. You know what they do the rest of the time? They play. And you know what else happens? The teachers get Johnny or Sally that's having trouble understanding math. They bring them in the school and they teach them one-on-one. So if you give the teachers enough time and to do that, because they all love to teach, they wouldn't be in that job. They're not in it for the money.
So how do you expect to raise money so the teachers will get adequate salaries and their supplies and the whole thing?
Well, there's 100 people in Boise. And the bunch that's been there now for 20 plus years, the domineering bunch that get elected every year with the help of these political action committees, plus the Limbaugh, Hannity, Beck, and Savage that's funded by the Koch brothers out of Kansas, plus the American Legislative Exchange Council. Okay, they've got a lot of money behind them. And quite frankly, when you follow the money and you look at the money, you can get the answer. They're not funding education. When Governor Otter, he gave a talk here in ISU, and he says, I quit school at 17, and I wanted to join the Navy. Well, it didn't quite work out, so I got my GED, and I went on to college. I'm one of 10 siblings. I'm the only guy that got college. He's got a lot of charisma, but he doesn't support education. He doesn't. You know, when I talk to him down in Downey and I watched how he does things, I understand he was a corporate executive at one time, and through marriage and what have you. He's got all the characteristics of the corporations in this country. And so Idaho, in my opinion, is, the kids, the 250,000 kids are the ones that are really being left out here. Now, as far as me, I've got to get elected. What I'm telling you now doesn't mean a thing unless I get elected. When I met Brad Little during 2016, he was up there in the parade in Blackfoot. I went over and introduced myself. I said, Brad, I'm Mike Saville. I'm running for the Senate. Said, yeah, I know you are. I said, well, Brad, I'm working hard to get elected. He says, we're working hard to make sure you don't get elected. Well, later on, I saw him here, I think in the spring, and I said, well, Brad, you were successful. I didn't get elected. Yeah, he says, Idaho is different. Well, Idaho is being funded, all the politics is being funded by these rich guys. And you're talking millionaires. The Limbaugh, Hannity, Beck, and Savage you hear on the radio is funded by the Koch consortium of 400 millionaires coming out of Kansas. Now, have you ever heard on Limbaugh saying, make sure you listen to Rush Limbaugh, because he's being sponsored by mom and pop grocery store on Oak Street. You ever heard that?
I don't watch him.
No, he's on the radio.
I don't listen to him either.
Well,
go ahead.
Yeah, well, I've been in communications. I can tune on one radio station, and I can hear Rush Limbaugh from northern Utah, Wyoming, and southern Idaho on 6 or 7 different stations at the same time, 3 hours a day. And that happened as a result of the fairness doctrines in 1980 and that sort of thing. But the thing is, people are getting, if you say the same thing over and over, and you say this guy's a liberal or he's anti-this or what have you, then people, they're influenced by that. It's called marketing. Okay? So people have to recognize that they're being marketed to really big time, and who's getting shortchanged are our children and grandchildren. Expanding ACA, Medicaid, okay? That's another thing. 78,000 people, right? Before Obamacare, or, that court decision, there's 32, or I want to get that number right, but there's at least 32 states that have adopted the Medicaid expansion or closed the gap. The state of Idaho has turned it down, and why? Okay, and we're talking other red states, they've taken the money. The amount of money that comes in with that ACA, at least the first 3 years, was 100% covered. It was nearly $1 billion that would have come into Idaho. And 6,000 meant 6,000 jobs, there was 5,000 veterans. I figured 2,800 Bannock County residents, if they expanded Medicaid, they could in fact have health insurance they can afford based on tax credits, based on income. Now, it's working in other states all around us, but not here in Idaho. They turned it down and drugged their feet for 4 years. It's about $4 billion.
And what was the reason?
Well, the reason primarily all kinds of, we don't want the federal government money, but yet they've taken $3 billion in terms of not growing crops. That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay? And for the roads and for the bridges, but not for 78,000 people. I think it's primarily because of the income tax reporting requirement. In other words, the amount of tax credits that you get is based on your income.
Yeah.
Now, it's not too uncommon, for a farmer, for example, of grossing $300,000, having a brand new tractor, but the net result, because of all the tax write-offs, he only shows a net of $20,000. Okay? When I was down in Arizona, there was this guy saying, he was the head of the Farm Bureau. We went on a tour.
Yeah.
It's an incredible place. I learned a lot when I went on that tour. They have 10 crops on an annual basis. And he says, he went to a meeting with all these farmers, and they were all griping about taxes and everything else. And he says, gentlemen, I wouldn't gripe too loud. He says, because 5 of you have got Lear jets on your barn. That was a strong message of it. He was very educated. I learned quite a bit. The point is, it's not. I mean, it's an ideology that's wrong. Okay, it's thinking. Maybe it's going to impact the taxes. A lot of people, and as well as I, there's an anti-government check and there's a government check. Okay, cash versus taxable income. Okay, and people need to understand that. I ran into a gal that was griping about the illegals voting. There's illegals voting, and that's why my Social Security disability check is so low. And I said, that's not true. But I didn't know it at the time until I talked to her later. She said, I can't feed my kids on $100. But here again, you go and talk to some guys, and they said, my Social Security check is the minimum, only $800. He said, but over the years, I was working for cash. And if you're going to do that, and then there was other folks that never contributed to Medicare, but when they got 55, they made sure they got a job that contributed 40 quarters to Medicare.
Yeah.
So the system has been really used.
I was always concerned about the wives of men.
Right.
When they're a housewife for 50 years or 40 years, there's nothing that's paid into Medicare, let alone...
No, they get it.
You know what the response was when I asked about that? The response is, well, when the husband dies, she'll get the survivor
she doesn't
benefits.
get any. No, she will.
Survivor benefits, that's all. But she should have her own.
Well, she's got to work.
Housework is pay. The husband should pay her taxes
but you got to
and so
remember,
forth.
this is an insurance program. Okay.
I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about the Social Security.
Social Security is an insurance program. You can opt out of it. You don't have to pay into it.
But the point being is, we talk about unemployment. That's another issue with Idaho.
Well, unemployment, but let me get back to this. When he dies, let's just say that your husband, your mom, my wife was a stay-at-home mom while the kids were home, and then later on she went to work. She's got a retirement now, a small retirement. But as far as the wife, when the wife and their husband dies, and say he's making $2,000, she gets the $2,000. That doesn't stop. Okay, and
Well,
also
to me, that's not a remedy.
Well, it's just a fact. It's an insurance program.
What I'm saying is, if she's a housewife and she has to work probably harder than the husband,
Well, absolutely, it's worth $50,000 a year.
Then she should be provided for, not when he dies.
Well,
but anyway, that's another argument.
I know.
So what else are you going to tell us about what you're
Okay.
going to
Well,
enjoy?
anyway, this has to be. There's 1,000 people that die in Idaho because of this non-expansion, and there's no reason for it. They turned down $4 billion. $4 billion. Okay, and the rationale is baloney, as far as I'm concerned. Now, what can I do about it? You got to get more Democrats in there. Now, how can you do that? Because either that, or you have to do the best job you can convincing folks. But I'm telling you right now, it appears that the corporations are running the store in Boise.
And in other states.
Oh, in other states, but I'm talking about Idaho. I'm just talking about Idaho. Other states, it's not. It's like our minimum wage. We're the second lowest minimum wage. We have 7% of all the jobs are low minimum wage or under. There's only one other state that beat us, and that's Tennessee at 7.4%.
Are you going to change that minimum wage?
You have to work for it. It's not. This is not a sprint. You can't do this overnight. You've got to have the people there to make it happen. And right now, there's not enough people to do that, but you got to start somewhere.
$7.25 an hour, is that what it is?
That's what it is. You can't live on that.
You can't live on it.
No, you can't, even with 2 jobs. Okay, but that's the key, but people don't quite understand it. I talked to one manager, he says, I can't have my guys making more money than me. And I looked at him, I said, you're a manager, right? How long do you think you're going to put up with the fact they're going to be making more money than you? Don't you realize that if they get a pay raise, you're going to get a pay raise? And he thought for a minute, he says, by darn, you're right. I says, if they're making more money with you, why would you want to still be a manager? I've been a manager, it's a tough job. Wouldn't you rather be one of those guys? But how long is your boss going to allow that to happen? The other thing is that it raises everything. Right now we got corporate welfare, and it's not right. Okay.
So you're not going to push for any minimum wage then?
Absolutely, I would.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Well, if I'm elected, I'd be one of 33, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now they have 85% control of this state. Now what would that? Now I can go there and I can talk it up, right? But you got to have the votes to make it happen. And I will use my business acumen, my sales technique, to try and convince folks of the right thing to do.
As long as you say what you think is correct.
It is
and
correct.
Fact and some basis to truth.
That's correct. It is. I don't want to forget one other thing, is that I incarcerated young people. When we were down asking people to register to vote, kept running into these under 25 folks that kept saying, I can't register to vote. And I said, why not? I'm a felon. And as I went through a number of people, I never asked why they were a felon, but I thought, you're too young to be a felon. What's going on here? Well, it turned out.
Matter.
Huh?
It doesn't matter.
I know, but there's
juveniles can be felons.
Well.
But anyway, go ahead with your.
Well, you know what you give up with a felon, don't you? As a felon? And you know what the penalties are?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can't vote for one.
Can't vote, can't have a gun.
With we Indian people, we can't hunt and fish, which is our life.
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay. What it is, you can't vote. You can't own a gun. You can't get a federal loan for education. You can't get a federal job. You've got to put it on all your applications that you're a felon. There are 4,800 restrictions that prevent people from assuming a normal life once you get a felon. Once you're a felon.
Well, let me ask you, on voting, aren't there some felonies that are acceptable?
There's a procedure that I'm not familiar with, but you can get it expunged toward the end if you go through a certain program. Once it's done, you can vote again. I'm not sure as far as job application, the way they word it is, have you ever been a felon? I don't know how long that they have to answer yes.
Well, sometimes it says convicted.
Yeah.
As felony conviction.
Okay, but there's still a lot you give up.
Yeah.
And one of the things as we were going on, we talked to young folks. They were saying that they got busted for pot. And when you look around at that in the other states, we spend $51 billion, and we have 900,000 people incarcerated because of pot. And you look at it and you say, and I look back in the service when I was in the Air Force, we never had pot. We had alcohol, whiskey, and wine, but we never had pot. It wasn't until the Vietnam War happened is when the planes from Southeast Asia started arriving in Germany, and that's when they were putting drugs. And it was actually the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese and China that were making sure that our soldiers had enough pot and drugs.
What about opium?
And same thing,
That's
whatever it was.
Wrong.
Yeah. Well, the only thing is that the war on Vietnam War was ended in 1974. We need to end this war on drugs. It's not right. We're incarcerating our young. It costs $38,000 to incarcerate somebody in a penitentiary. We have states all around us that finally got tired of it. They're to the west of us here, from Nevada and California, Washington, Oregon, got Colorado. It's time to really rethink that. Now, as far as that goes, I'm not one of those guys that use it. We've had problems in our family with it that invaded it, in school. We had to really fight it. But, I'm not a participant. However, I don't think it's right we're incarcerating our young people.
How many did you say were incarcerated?
I think 900,000 in the United States.
Oh, U.S. What about Idaho?
Idaho's probably about the same. We have 2.4 million people incarcerated, 2.2 million. About half are because of pot. Okay.
When you say young people, you mean
under 35.
Under 35, really?
Yeah. These kind of things, there's other specifics depending on which database you look at. But really, quite frankly, and then we have the medical marijuana, and I attend the events to try and learn as much as I can.
Yeah.
But there's a definite use for that. They have various initiatives right now. There's an initiative happening between that and this. Why do we have to have initiatives? Why can't we have legislators that are going to listen?
Yeah.
We are not living in 1974. Do not have reefer madness. It's time to end this thing. It's costing us too much money. That $38,000 that we have could be used to fund education. The other thing that we've got here, and I don't know if you're aware.
What about prescription drugs? I understand.
Well, that's another issue. I mean, that's, the opiates, it's another issue. Drugs is a serious problem. We have 20 GIs committing suicide every day. We got a lot of problems that need to be fixed. One of the things too that I learned is we have twice as many women incarcerated in Idaho than the rest of the country. The rest of the country averages 65. We have 125 here, and I can't get an answer why. So anyway,
you have a lot of unanswered questions.
Well, you have to work. And this is a consensus. We live in a democracy.
Is that what it is?
Well, I don't know. Mr. Trump's trying to turn it into a kingdom, I think. But one of the things I want to finish with is, first of all, Idaho's not poor. It's just been poorly managed politically.
I would agree.
And the secondary thing is with organized people, we can beat organized money. Okay, but we've got to start talking with each other and realize that. Now, like I say, a lot of issues and things. I will do my best. You can see I've got the skills. If I'm elected, I'll do my best to represent the constituent and what I talk here and some other issues. But if I'm not elected, I can't do anything, and I won't do it again. But I'm going to give it my shot because I really owe it to the people from last time, and plus the amount of money I put into it that I gave up a trip overseas as a result of that. But I learned a lot. I really did, and that's why I'm so passionate about it. Things have got to be fixed, and the stuff that's happened to Idaho since I was a kid is a result of this domination by this ideology that dominates Idaho. I saw Cecil Andrews, and I asked him, I said, Cecil, what the heck happened? You were governor and Frank Church was senator when I left. And he says, well, I'm darned if I know. Well, I'll tell you why. It's the money.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for coming, Mr. Mike Saville. You're running for the 2nd District.
I'm running for
Senate.
District 28.
Oh, District 28, excuse me.
Which is the donut hole around Pocatello.
Okay.
From American Falls all the way to Lava and Downey.
Okay. And when's voting supposed to take place?
May 15th is the primary, and I think November is the regular.
All right.
Working hard now.
Mike Saville, thank you.
You betcha. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.